YouTube? It is Absolute Force here today, and this is my first video, along with...
Xander, everyone. Thanks for having me here
Wait,
with
what?
my friend that has 0 subscribers.
Wait, what? Xander. Alright. Anyways,
Wow. Just
we're
wow.
gonna do discussion. Basically, it's about Death Note. Like, what if L picked up the Death Note instead of, like, Yagami? Like, let's say Yagami became, like, a detective, and L had the Death Note. But L's still a detective, but he has the Death Note. What would he do with it?
Okay, so let's say Okay, let me just get this straight. If Al still had his morals, unlike Light, like Light doesn't really have that high morals. Like you saw that at the beginning of the series. He was even like not at the beginning of the series that much. Like he was thinking about it, but he was also considering that it would be kind of murder. But he anyway did it. So that tells you enough about his morals. But now it is basically like this. Does Al doesn't have the same morals as Light. So would Al actually kill someone? Is the question.
Alright, so first I'm gonna look into like Light Yagami, because I have an argument against the moral thing. So I believe Light Yagami saw the Death Note as like kind of a tool to kind of like really show what he runs to do in the world. Because I believe he'll still have the same goal without the Death Note. He just won't do it if he doesn't have the Death Note, because it's not possible for him to do it.
That's actually quite possible. But now my question is, okay, so we know Al is already a detective.
Yeah.
What if how do you think, what if he writes in the Death Note that the criminal must be caught, or whoever he wants to catch. I mean, he could probably do it naturally too, but
Alright.
since he is Al. But let's say he writes in the Death Note that the criminal must be caught, and then, like whenever the criminal has to die, he writes that's when the criminal dies, at the end of his lifespan, but the criminal will be caught by me. That way he could cheat into basically catching every single criminal, doing the exact same job as Light, but putting every single criminal behind bars.
See, that could work, but we're gonna have to think of how we're gonna make them kind of like go against each other in this scenario. So I believe Light is gonna join like he's most likely gonna join the SPK. But by the time he joins, L is gonna be having like be done like a lot of damage, because Light at this point in the series is still in high school and he has to go to college.
Oh, he's a senior.
Well, yeah.
That's his. Yeah, it's more of like in the middle of his senior year, since they did say like, wow, you've been doing this much for like the past 2 months, like Ryuk said. Like you've been doing these many names and stuff like that. It was 2 months, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it was 2. Yeah, I believe it was 2. I can't remember. I know it was 2 something. I think it was 2 weeks or 2 months. But if that statement's true, like the 2 months, that means he's already been like, let's say he's in the middle of the senior year. He's last year from high school. Then he's going to college. Okay. So, how long do you think it studies for a policeman to be, or a detective in college, is the question.
Well, based on, since Light Yagami must have joined the police force, I think he'll probably go for the degree that'll take less time for him to acquire. Or probably the degree that'll make it easier for him to get to like a higher rank in the police force so he can be a detective.
Okay. Now the question is, will Al still be in the same position where he controls the police?
That's the
where
question.
He works in that team.
Because
if so,
okay, you can go.
It will base. Sorry, no, you can speak. It's fine.
All right, so if he still controls the police station, I don't think there's a way he can be stopped. Because like, if he has the Death Note and he controls the police station at the same time, there's no way anybody can touch him, basically. And they don't even know his face and identity either. He's just L to them.
True.
So
There's
let's go ahead.
No, you can speak. It's fine. I was just going to say there's a possibility if Light worked through Watery to discover the Wombley House in England, that he might, very small might, be able to do something with Al, since Nier and Mallow had their pictures. So if Light could discover who Al is that way, there might be a possibility. Small might. Like very, very small.
Yeah, but I think for the sake of this scenario, so it's actually possible for L and Light to have their little mental battle, I think we should go ahead and say that L isn't a part of the SPK, or whatever it's called, the detective. He's just like a detective, but he isn't attached to them, because like, they don't know Kira exists, so there's no reason he would be with them. Because that's the only reason he came to begin with.
Okay. But does Al still have his same role in the world? Because they all know him as Al. They know him as that
he does.
team.
He does.
Okay, so he's still the #1 detective.
Yeah.
Then who would actually suspect him is the question. Because he's the #1 detective. He is what everyone calls the best. So why would they suspect him?
Now here's where the part that comes in where we have to kind of like guess a little bit. So, Light Yagami is smart, but L is smarter than him. But there's still, he could still come up with like some kind of like, you know how L like knew that Light was Kira. I have a feeling it's gonna be kind of like that, but in a different way. Like I'm pretty sure like Light's father's gonna tell like him about L a little bit, like how he's the smartest detective and all this stuff, and he's gonna be like, well, if there was somebody who had the power to kill people, and he like was the smartest of all time, how would we know if he was like real or something like that?
That's possible, but let's say, okay, so now the killings randomly started. Okay,
Yeah.
so now everyone's like, oh, Kira exists, blah 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 blah. Naturally, the same thing will happen. What happens in the anime? They will reach out to Al, or Al would reach out to them, since Al still needs to keep up the maintenance that he is the best detective. He will solve the case. Like he says, I am justice. He will still have that same moral code. So, it will be the same situation. It will be the same situation as in what Light had to face, where he had to put up the disguise that he was innocent, but at the same time trying to cover his own ass. So Al would need to do the exact same thing. Now personally, I think Al would actually win in this case. I don't think Light would be able to actually solve the case. Not because Light's not as smart or smarter than Al, but Al has the massive advantage that he is the lead detective. He decides what happens. He decides who is on the case with him. Plain and simple.
Oh, all right. So for the scenario, the conclusion is L would win because he's like, he controls the investigation basically, and he has power to death now. But for the sake of this, let's highball Light or the scenario real quick so it favors him a little bit, just so we can try to come to a different conclusion. All right, so let's say L decided to show himself like he did originally, because he would have to if Kira existed, and he like wanted everyone to think he was legit. Because remember, those detectives started leaving because L wasn't doing anything.
True.
So let's say he showed himself again, all that stuff happens. Light and L come face to face. Now, even if we do highball Light and say he knew that he was Kira or something, L could just kill Light at the end of the day because he knows his name and he knows his face. It's over.
But what if Light makes the exact same statement Al made to protect his own ass? If I am dead within the next few weeks, he is Kira, or Al is Kira.
Well, I think.
What then?
I think because L is like an actual detective or like a more credible one, they wouldn't believe him because L could probably make some logic about how like Kira killed him, or that Kira's in the investigation that he knew about it, so he made him die to make him look like he tried to frame him basically. I think that might work, but we'll just continue with what you were saying.
Al could actually do that. He could actually say, yes, I suspect him, he is 1%, and then eventually build up like we know he does. Because at the end he said no, he was 7% when Al, or Light, put on that act.
He even
like, he
said,
was always yeah.
Every time he said the percent, it was actually backwards, and he was actually 99% and 93%.
Yeah.
Likely, so he could do the same thing. There's really no way that Light could win, honestly, without a death note. And even if he had a death note, there's no guarantee he could win.
Because the thing is, Al could anytime kill Light, any single moment he wants.
And
That's
Light doesn't
the
even know his
massive
name, so it's impossible for him to kill him. And he would never use the Shimigami eyes, because he wants to live as a savior.
That's true.
And if L dies, like Light is already they're all suspects because they all saw his face. So
That's true. But now the question is, what if Misa came into the picture as well, since she has the Shinigami eyes?